Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Pygame tutorial. Before we get into this, I would like to apologize for not uploading any content on this channel recently, and it's just because I've been taking a little bit of a break from game development to work on some other hobbies. Anyway, I'm going to be trying to make some more content on the channel over the next few weeks, so be sure to stay tuned. Okay, before we start coding, I'm going to show you a quick preview of what we're making today. So as you can see, we have this multiplayer game of Pong. I can move both characters. I'm controlling one with W, A, S, and D, and one with the arrow keys. And as you can see, the ball is working. It is bouncing around the screen, and we have a nice background, and we also have a score counter, which actually works. Anyway, let's start coding this. So the first thing that we're going to need to do in our Python script is to import Pygame, which I will leave a link in the description for a tutorial on how to do that if you don't have it installed already. We're also going to import time, and we're also going to import random. So these two modules here are built into Python, so when you download Python you will have these installed, but Pygame you're going to have to install externally, and I'll leave a link in the description for how to do that if you don't already know. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to initiate Pygame, which is simply done with pygame.init. And then we're also going to set up a clock quickly. And basically what this clock is going to allow us to do is set the frame rate of the game later on, but for now we can just ignore that. So the next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to set the display of our window, which can simply be done with pygame.display.set_caption, and then we just set this to whatever we like. I'm just going to set mine to Pong because that's the game we're making today. And then we're going to define a couple variables here. So we're going to define a variable moving _right, and we're going to set this equal to true. And we're going to make another variable, moving left is equal to false. And all of this is going to make a little bit more sense later on when we start coding out the actual ball and the paddles to hit the ball. But for now, let's just do this. Then we're going to define some colors. So black is equal to just the RGB value of black. So that's 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to also set our display, which is going to be this. So display is equal to pygame.display.set_mode. And then we just, in this tuple, we basically just set the resolution of our screen. So I'm just going to do 650 by 550. And the larger these numbers are, obviously, the larger your screen is going to be. Then we're going to also import a font, which is going to be, we're just going to call it font, is equal to pygame.font.font. And then we just need to set the font that we would like here, and I'm just going to go with Free Sans Bold .ttf, and this should come with Pygame when you install it. And then we also just need to set a size for this font, so 64 in this case. And then we also need a load in the background that you saw in that little demo clip. So background is equal to pygame.image.load, and then our background image. So this background image you can either make yourself and just set it to, and then when you're making it, just make it in this resolution, so 650 by 550. Alternatively, you can head to the itch.io page in the description and download the images from there, because I have everything set up over there for you guys to download. And then just have this background image in the same directory as your script. Alright, now that we've set up all our variables, we can start coding out the paddle. So for this, we're going to be doing this in object-oriented format. So we're going to go class paddle object. And now we're just going to have to initiate our class. So for that, we do a define __init. underscore underscore, and then these are where we're gonna put in the variables for this class. So the first one, as usual, is self. Then we're gonna need an x, a y, a width, a height, and a velocity. And then let's just define, and now we're just going to initiate all of these variables. So self.x is equal to x, self.y is equal to y, self.width is equal to width, and self.height is equal to height. And then self.velocity is equal to and then we're going to define one more variable, which is going to be quite important later on. We're going to say self.hitbox, which is going to be the hitbox of our paddle, is equal to pygame.rect, which is basically rectangle. And then the rectangle is going to need a x position, a y position, a width, and a height. So we're just going to use the variables that we've just defined. So self.x, self.y, self.width, and self.height. Okay, so that's our rectangle. Now we're going to make a new method called draw. And this is just going to take in self and display. Now, in this variable, we're going to do two things. The first thing that we're going to do is update our hitbox, because the thing about this paddle is that it's going to be moving. We're going to be using either W and S to move it, or the up and down arrow keys, which means we have to be constantly refreshing the position of this hitbox, which we can simply do by copying this line and pasting it in here. So that should get our hitbox to constantly be refreshing every frame, and then we can also and now we actually have to draw this paddle to the screen, which we're simply going to do by saying pygame.draw.rect, and then we're going to draw it to the display, and we're going to make this black, which we have defined up here. And then in terms of the position of this rectangle and its width and height, we're going to use the self.hitbox variable, which we've just defined. So self.hitbox. Okay, so if you're a little bit confused about what's going on here, I'll try and break it down quickly. So we're basically initializing a bunch of variables, all of which are necessary for this paddle class. So we've got an x, a y, width, height, and velocity. And then all that we're doing is we're constantly updating this hitbox variable to reflect on the current position of our paddle, and then drawing a rectangle at the hitbox location. So hopefully that clears some stuff up. And the next class we're going to create is a ball class, because remember, we also have a ball bouncing around our screen. So just similar thing as above, class ball object, def __ init. If you want a more in-depth tutorial about how this object-oriented stuff works, because it can be a little confusing, I'll leave a link for a good tutorial down in the description. And all that this ball is going to need is self, x, y, and radius. Self, and then we just need to initialize everything. So self.x equals x, self.y is equal to y, self.radius. Radius is equal to radius. So we need a radius instead of a width and a height, because this is going to be a ball, because this is going to be a circle instead of a rectangle. Then, just as above, we're going to do a define draw, which is going to take self and display, just as above. And now we're going to do a very similar thing here. We are going to define a hitbox. And I've actually just forgotten some variables up here that we need to define. We also need to define self.vel, and we're just going to hard code this to 1. And we also need a hitbox. So self.hitbox is equal to pygame.rect self.x self.y, and then we're just going to do 5 and 5. So the reason that So you might be wondering why we need this rectangle hitbox when our ball is a circle. So circle hitboxes are a little more difficult to do in Pygame, and since that this ball is going to be quite a small object, it's not really going to make a difference whether our hitbox is a rectangle or a circle. So just keep that in mind. Then in our draw, it's going to be very similar to before. We're just going to take this hitbox variable and put it in here to update it, and then we're just going to say pygame.draw.circle, because now we want to draw a circle instead of a square, instead of a rectangle. And this is going to be display. Once again, we'll make it black, and then we're just going to put it at, in a tuple, the position of self.x and the position of self.y. And then we're also going to take self.radius, because remember, since this is a circle, we also need a radius. Okay. Alright, now that we've got our two main classes, we can start writing some actual game logic. So definition. The first thing I'm going to make here is a function called update. And what this function is going to do is it's going to be responsible for basically drawing all of our stuff to the screen. So the stuff like the paddles and also the ball and the scores and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is at the top we're going to say display.blitz background. So this is the background variable that we initialized up at the top, and we're just going to blitz this to position 0, 0. So basically what all this is going to do is it's going to draw our background to the screen at coordinate 0, 0. Now the next thing that we're going to have to do is we are going to need to say display.blitz, and then we're going to blitz here a variable which we haven't defined yet, but we will get around to that in a second. We're just going to call it text1, and we're going to blitz it at 150. And then display dot blitz text2, and we're going to be blitzing that at 550. Okay, and then we're going to need one more text object which we're going to need to display. So display.blitz text3, and we're going to be blitzing this at 100, 300. So these will make a little bit more sense just now, just don't worry about them for now. Then the next thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to say paddle1.draw, and we're going to draw it to the display, and paddle2.draw, we'll also draw it to the display. And then the last thing, we're going to need to say ball, so we're just going to say ball_.draw, and we're going to draw it to the display. So the reason we can use the draw function here and not something like blitz is because in our classes we have actually defined a draw function. So this will make a little bit more sense once we've actually initialized these variables, because currently if I run this I'm going to get an error. So just bear with me for a few more seconds. Then the next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to set our frame rate. So we're just going to say clock.tick 60, and this is basically just going to run the game at 60 frames per second. And then the next thing that we're going to do is update the Pygame display, because currently if we ran this then it wouldn't work properly and nothing would be displaying. So what we have to do to fix that is say pygame.display.update. Okay, and that is all of the drawing that needs to be done. So now that we've done the update function, we can actually start with our main loop. But first, we need to define some of the variables that we are calling up here. So let's start with the paddles. Paddle1 is equal to paddle, and now we need to put in all of the variables which we've defined up here. So what we'll do is we'll say paddle1 is equal to paddle, and the x we'll put at 580 on the screen. The y we'll put at 200. The next thing we need the width we'll put at 12. And the height we'll put at 70, and the velocity we'll put at 8. Then we just can copy this, and we'll change this to paddle 2. And this one, instead of drawing at 580, we want to draw at 60. and we'll keep it at 200, and the rest will actually stay the same. The next variable we'll define is the ball. So we'll say ball underscore is equal to ball. And then we're going to draw this at x of 75, y of 200, and a radius of 5. Next up, we just want to do a quick velocity for the ball. So for that, we'll just say ball underscore velocity. And we'll set this equal to 7. Now, we could have done this up in the ball function as well, but I'm just going to do it down here because it doesn't make a difference. What we're then going to do is we're going to define a variable called random direction. And we're going to set this equal to 0 for the time being. However, what this will do is whenever the ball will hit either the paddle or one of the sides of the game, then we're going to want to bounce it in a random direction. And for that, we're going to be using this random direction variable. The next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to keep track of the player's score. So for that, we'll do player underscore one underscore score. And we'll set that to 0. And player 2 underscore score, also 0. And then the last variable we're going to say is run is equal to true. Alright, now that we've got all of our variables, we can actually start writing the game loop. So we're going to say while run, which is basically just going to be a loop which is going to keep on looping until this run variable is equal to false. So let's just quickly add some logic so that we can escape out of this while loop once we have finished the game. So we're just going to say for event in pygame.event.get if event.type is equal to pygame.quit. Then we're basically just going to say run is equal to, first we're going to say quit, and then as a failsafe we'll just say run is equal to false to stop the loop from running. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is it's basically going to check if we have pressed the little X at the top of the screen, and if we have, then we're just going to quit the game. So now that we've got the logic for that down, we can actually start with the fun stuff. So first, let's do our text. So we're going to say text1 is equal to font.render, and we're going to render the string value of the player underscore 1 underscore score. And then we're just going to say bold is equal to true, and this is going to be white, which is a color which we haven't yet defined. So let's just come up here and we're going to say white is equal to 255,255,255, which is just the RGB value for white. Then we can just copy this and just change this to text2 and player 2 underscore score. Now that we've done the text, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to handle for moving. We're going to handle movement for both the ball and the paddles. So for this, we're first going to define keys, which is going to be equal to pygame.key.get underscore pressed. And alright, I'll explain what all this code is doing in a minute once we've written it all. We're then going to say if keys, and we're going to be checking if we've tapped the up key. So basically in Pygame, pygame.k underscore up represents the up arrow key on the keyboard, so the key that you use to navigate up and down in your script. And then if this, so basically what this is doing is it's getting a list of all of the keys which are currently being pressed on the keyboard, and then if the Pygame, and then if the arrow up key is being pressed, then we want to do something. So what we want to do if that is pressed is, oh yeah, and we also need to add one extra check here. We need to say and paddle 1.y is greater than 0. So basically, this will basically just stop us the screen. So if we get too high or low down, then this is going to stop us. We're then basically just going to say paddle.y, paddle1, dot y minus equals paddle1 dot velocity. So basically, every frame that the up arrow is pressed, we're going to subtract 8 from our paddle 1's y coordinate, which is going to make it go upwards. And we're also going to have to do the same for the downwards direction. So all we're going to do is we're going to copy this and paste it here. Oops. And then we're just going to say, instead of k underscore up, k underscore down. And then we're going to say if paddle1.y is less than 480. Oops. So basically these two checks together are going to stop our paddle from going off the screen. And then here, instead of subtracting, we're going to add. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And then we're just going to copy these lines and do a very similar thing for the paddle 2, which as mentioned before is going to be controlled with W, A, S, and D. So we're just going to say K underscore W and K underscore S, and then we're just going to change this from paddle 1 to paddle 2. So hopefully this all makes sense so far, and the next thing that we're going to do is handle movement for the ball. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say if moving right, which if you remember is a variable we defined at the top of our script, and we're going to say if it is, then what we're going to do is every second that we're moving right, we're going to add a certain amount to our x. So we're going to say ball.x plus equals ball underscore velocity. And ball.y plus equals our random underscore direction. So currently this is set to 0, but every time that we hit onto a wall or onto a paddle, we're going to set this to a random number so that our ball will bounce in a random direction. And we're going to do a similar thing for if moving left. We're just going to simply say here ball underscore x minus equals ball underscore velocity and ball underscore dot y minus equals random direction. So essentially we're just doing the opposite if we're moving left. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to have to do, and this is pretty much our last thing, is ball collisions. Now this is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to do my best to explain what's going on here. So what we need to do is we need to check if the ball is colliding with anything, so whether it's a paddle or the top or the bottom of the screen. We also need to check if the ball is going off the screen on the left and right directions. And so checking for collisions is going to be pretty simple, because if you remember up in our classes, we gave a hitbox to the ball and to the paddles. So basically all that we're going to have to do is be checking every second if the ball hitbox and the paddle hitboxes collide. And if they do, then we're going to do some stuff. So let's start writing that. So we're going to say if ball underscore dot hitbox. So we're accessing the hitbox component of our ball class dot collide rect, which is a built-in Pygame function to check if two rects are colliding with each other. And then we just need to give it a rectangle that to test for collisions with. So we're just going to say paddle1.hitbox. Okay, so basically all we're doing here is if we're checking that if our ball hitbox collides with our paddle1 hitbox. And if so, then here's what we're going to do. We're going to set, first of all, we're going to set random underscore direction to 0 first. So whatever it was previously, set it to 0. Then we're going to say random underscore direction is equal to random dot range between -8 and 8. Now you can fiddle around with these values, and tweaking these values in my experience is going to make the game more difficult or more easy, because the higher that these values are, so if you did something bigger than this, then the ball is going to have more angles which can bounce off the paddle at, hence making the game a little more difficult. But having them at low values, such as -2, 2, is going to make it so they bounce off at pretty shallow angles, which is going to make the game a bit easier. Okay, then basically, so because we have paddle 1 on the left of our screen, we're going to say, we now want to say, because we have the first paddle on the right of our screen, we want to say that once we collide with the paddle on the right, we no longer want to move right. So what we're going to say is we're going to say moving underscore left is equal to true now, because we want to start moving left and we want to stop moving right. So to do that, we're just going to say moving right is equal to false. Okay, and now we're going to do a similar thing for when the ball hits against the paddle 2. We're going to just copy this code, so I don't have to rewrite it. And we're going to just change this to paddle 2.hitbox. And this is going to stay the same. This is going to stay the same, and all we're going to do is instead of, we're going to start moving right and stop moving left. Because now we're hitting the paddle on the left. So we want to stop moving left and start moving right. So that handles ball collisions on the paddles. Next thing that we're going to want to do is handle ball collisions on the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen. So to do this, we're going to say if ball underscore dot y is less than or equal to 4, then we are going to basically get the ball to bounce off the top. So this would be, we're going to get the ball to bounce. So to do this, we're just going to say random underscore direction is equal to 0, and then random underscore direction is equal to random dot rand range between 1 and 3. So basically, if the ball bounces on, I believe this is the top, then it's going to bounce at a random angle off. And then we're just going to copy this, and we're going to say if the ball is at a position that is greater than or equal to 550, then we're going to do the same thing, but all we're going to do is change -3, change this to -3 and this to 1. Because depending on whether we hit on the bottom or the top, we're going to want to bounce off in a different direction. Because if we hit at the top, then we don't want our ball to be able to bounce upwards. We want it to have to bounce down, right? And inverse if we hit the bottom. If we hit the bottom, we're going to want to bounce up. So that's why these numbers are different here. Okay, so that handles collisions on the top and the bottom. But now what happens if the ball goes off the screen? Then we can assume that one of the players has scored a point, right? So we can say if ball underscore dot x this time, because now we're checking the x is greater than 675, then we're going to say that our player one underscore score has got a point. So we're just going to say plus equals 1. And now what we're going to want to do is reset the ball's position. So we're going to say ball underscore dot x is equal to paddle 2 dot x. So basically just setting it to the paddle 2's position. And ball underscore dot y is equal to paddle 2 dot y. Okay, cool. And we're just going to do a similar thing for if the other player scores a point. So we're just going to copy this, and we're going to say if ball.x is less than -15, then we're just going to say that the player 2's score goes up, and we're going to set it to the player 1 position. Alright, we're nearly done here. The last thing that we have to do is just render the scores, and the last thing that we have to do is just check the scores to see if anyone has won yet. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say if player 1 underscore score is greater than or equal to 12, so the game is going to be first to 12. Then we're going to say text 3 is equal to font dot render, and we're going to render the following message. We're going to just put it in a string just to be safe and say player 1 wins. Cool. And then we just need to put the other arguments for rendering text, so true to make it bold, and then we're just going to do it in 5, and then for the color we'll just do black. Cool. And then we're just going to say Aleph player 2 underscore score is greater than or equal to 12. Then we're just going to take this text 3 and put it back in here. And instead of saying that player 1 wins, we'll just say player 2 wins. Else, because if no player has won yet, then we don't want this text to display anything. So we'll just say else text 3, and then we'll just make these blank. Okay, so that is pretty much the script done. The very last thing we have to do is we simply have to call the update function. So there we go. We have pretty much created the game now. This should be Pong. So if we run this, we should see, we get an error. Oh, misspelling. So if we run this now, hopefully. Yeah, we don't need the brackets here. Okay, I've just been fixing up some spelling errors, and there's one mistake here which you might have made, and that is to say random dot direction when it should be random underscore direction. Just to point that out in case you get confused. Okay guys, so I've just been looking through my code, and I realized I made one error up here with the moving left and moving right, and that is that the ball.y and ball.y in the moving left and moving right must always be added to the random direction and not subtracted. So originally I had it like this. So if you're running into issues, just add it as a plus and everything should be working for you. So if you run this now, then you should see we get a game of Pong and we can play with both characters. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, then please be sure to hit the like button and also maybe consider subscribing. And please feel free to leave a comment with some other Pygame tutorial ideas that you would like me to make. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and as always, I'll see you all next time.